Hey there everyone, I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and damn it, I can't have a series called the Weekly Ratchet if I'm not producing a Weekly Ratchet. This being the 39th episode of the YouTube series dedicated to mine and your love of board games. And while this episode will be a little short and sweet, I do have a couple things to share. And so with all that being said, let's play the music. Yes, everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. That's right, back to a weekly program. This is the second consecutive week. Whatever, you get the point. It's a crazy time of year anyways, as it is. Obviously, last week was Thanksgiving. Christmas is just a few weeks away. And, with everything going on, it's just been a bit crazy. But I did take some time over the past weekend. I got some filming done. I got some editing done. I got the Dice Tower Best of 2024 video put together. I don't think that airs this week. I think that's going, I think the Winter Spectacular is next week, but I could be wrong. But I'm looking forward to folks seeing that. Put some good time into that. I also did finally put the finishing touches on the food truck race game. Gregory Alford, the designer, has been keeping on me pretty well at getting that done, and I should have had it done a while ago, so I'm glad to finally have that one pretty much out the door. Other than that, like I said, just trying to get back into the spirit here of things. Hey, I've got the Christmas tree going up behind me. My wife even surprised me with 2 ornaments she was able to quickly order featuring Timmy. And a couple tears were shed over that, but it'll be a difficult year this year without him. Just always laying on my shoulder as I sit there and enjoy the Christmas tree over at the house. But anyways, like I said, getting in the spirit, trying to keep things going, getting back into the hang of filming. I've got a couple of ideas and some things I want to do here at the end of the year and kicking off the next year, so stay tuned for all of that. As far as this program goes, I still don't have any new games, haven't gotten to purchase any new stuff. However, next weekend is PAX Unplugged up in Philadelphia. That is probably my closest largest, major convention that I've gotten to go to, and I actually started going in 2021. It's the longest convention I've been going to consecutively, and so I'm looking forward to going this year. I'm actually going Friday and Saturday this year. I've never done an overnight up there, at least not for PAX. So if you're going and you'd like to catch up, say hey, play a game, whatever, drop me a note, tabletoptoolbox@gmail.com, and I will reach out to you. We'll try and get something put together. And of course, if you see me, feel free to stop and say hey. All right, like I said, new games. I got question of the week, just a couple of recently played games to chat about. This should be a pretty short and sweet episode. Let's kick it off. Okay, just a couple of entries into last week's question of the week, and which is okay, kind of keeps things a little streamlined for today. Of course, also I realize that some folks may have gotten a little spoiled by the fact that they've had 2 weeks to get some of their answers in. Not this time. However, if you do get around to answering these a little late, no big deal. I do suspect that a What Do You Say segment will be coming up here pretty soon. In fact, had I prepared these show notes more than maybe 10 minutes ago, I probably would have thrown something like that in. Anyways, last week I did ask you to tell me your thoughts, hopes, plans, whatever, for trying to get games played over the holiday weekend, if of course you are having a holiday weekend here in the US. And here were the answers. C.R. Pohl said he wasn't necessarily looking to play any games, but looking forward to watching Paula Deming play the Mandalorian adventures on her Table for One series. I'm certainly a fan of Paula Deming. I'm really hoping I can run into her at PAX this weekend, but I've never really watched her Table for One series. I'm sure it's quite well done, though. Wayne Kruger said that gaming during the holidays is always tough with family and kids around, but was hoping to play Can't Stop, Green Team Wins, and Wavelength. Those are certainly some pretty good family weight games. I'm curious, the thing with Wavelength, and I really like Wavelength, but I feel like Wavelength is a game where you almost kind of have to pick the cards that you want to debate, because there are some in that box, like political orientation, which, no, I wouldn't even just kind of throw that. No, that went in the trash. I don't know how that happened. But anyways, hopefully you got some of those played. Teshera said he was hoping to play some slightly more obscure titles, mentioning Peacemakers, Horrors of War, and Project EOS Rise. He said this weekend he'll be giving thanks for lesser-known games and publishers. That really sounds like a cool idea. And you mentioned that I should look into Project EOS Rise. The name does ring a bell. I will have to check into that a little more just to see if I can even remember what I remembered about it. But hopefully you got those played. Hopefully that went over well. Wonderflonium said that Just One and The Crew have gone over well for family gaming, and that he might try So Clover and Trio this weekend. He also said that he's thankful for Tabletop Toolbox and the Weekly Ratchet. Sir, flattery will get you anything that you want. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. So Clover is such a cool game. Although it's funny because I met at Dice Tower East. We played a very quick kind of ad hoc game of that with a couple of the Dice Tower folks and some random attendees. And the one gentleman just couldn't do word associations. He was just like, I have such a mental block. He said, I just cannot do it. And I could see my mother having that problem or just not getting it, So I'm curious how that went over. Star Shocker said he too likes to choose small box or card games and realized he should probably add a few more to his collection. He mentioned Time's Up as an example. And that's a really good go-to, right? The small kind of party games, the small box or card games, definitely a good thing to resort to with family. Jeremy Brooks said he was hoping to play Santa's Workshop as he didn't get to play it last year, but as far as gaming with non-gaming family, he turns to games like Dragonwood, King of Tokyo, and Trekking Through History, as non-gamers tend to understand the concepts of those games pretty easily. I don't know Dragonwood. I need to check into that one. I'm surprised that folks would like Trekking Through History because I would think that whole sort of time clock system of that game would throw people off. That game definitely did not click for me personally. I know it's really, really popular, but man, I don't like the whole time track thing. Anyways, that's just me. I did not go into this weekend with any real plans for any gaming. I knew I had some filming to do, but there was one holiday game that I sort of saw on the shelf and I thought this needs to get played. And I played it, and I think that's a perfect time to jump to recently played games. All right, just a couple of titles here to cover with recently played games, and one that I have mentioned several times before. The first one, though, is one that we have never chatted about here on the Ratchet. Oh my god, this box has gotten so heavy. This is Obsession by Dan Halligan and Kayenta Games. This is... man, I have so much stories of this, and you can actually go out on the channel here and see some of the really, really old videos that I put together for the Dice Towers Board Game Breakfast talking about this game and talking about the fact that the first time I played it, I absolutely hated it. I was so angry in that game. And the main reason was that we were playing, I believe, at 4, and the downtime was absurd, especially when you were the first player of a round, because you'd go around the turn order, go around the table, and then the player who was second player would become the first player of the next round. And what that meant was that in a 4-player game, you had to wait 7 turns when you were the first player to get your next turn. And it was awful. And then we found out that was actually a prototype rule. He changed it with the second edition, which was what everyone was getting by then. And my buddy who taught us did not ever go and relearn the new rules. So when I found that out, I did go ahead and I got it. And I still just love the systems of this. If you don't know, so obviously this is a game set in the Victorian era, Victoria, England, and it's all about sort of having this estate and trying to bring your family name back to prominence, trying to bring your reputation back up, improve your, sort of the estate, the mansion that your family owns, and attracting all kinds of guests and visitors along the way. There are 2 core mechanisms in this. It's kind of deck building, but not in a traditional sense. Basically, your entire deck is your hand. So at some point, you'll have to refresh and pick all of your cards back up. But other than that, you always have all of your cards available. When you get new cards, they just go into your deck, and you can immediately use them in future turns. You don't have to, have a hand and cycle through a discard and all that kind of stuff. There's also worker placement to this. So as you're hosting these events at your mansion, which that in itself uses sort of a tableau building system, as you're hosting these events, you put workers on those events to be able to use those rooms, and then as you're inviting guests, some of the guests may require staff to assist them, whether it be butlers or a valet or a footman or something like that, to cater to their needs. This game is a lot of fun when you want to get into that kind of role playing. Again, I love to play this with like a top hat and a thin little pair of glasses just to be dorky. The only thing with this is that we have all the expansions, including the newest one, the characters expansion that just came out, and getting this thing organized for a play with just my wife and I took forever, almost 90 minutes for me to kind of go through all the different pieces, get everything where it was supposed to go, figure out the new rules, remember the old rules. I'm surprised she stuck it through with me, but we did have a good game of this, and I do also think I sort of broke a record for my highest score. It's a really good game at 2 when your downtime is fairly quick, fairly snappy. Even then, my wife kind of had to sit there and really plan out sort of her actions. Not for everybody, but still a really, really solid game. Do not play this at 5, ever. No. Anyways, that is Obsession. All right, up next over the holiday weekend, my friend Mike Gallo, who I've mentioned multiple times, had me and some friends over for some gaming. The first game that we played was Helios, and I did not write this down. I think this game is from 2014, 2016, something like that. I'll flash up here in the screen. This is from Z-Man Games, and it is everything that you remember an old dusty Euro game being, which is funny to say that an only a 8 or so year old game is dusty, but just the box is just that boring yellow box with a very, poor 2D drawing of some, palace buildings or whatever on the cover. It just looks like a snooze fest, and it didn't play much better. It's a very abstract game, and you kind of had 3 systems in play. You're taking one of 3 possible actions on your turn, and there's these sort of columns of tiles that you're drafting to choose as your action. And you almost always have the actions available to you, at least until towards the end of the round. But each action tile has a different color on it, and as you're stacking up these color tiles beneath your board, you'll eventually be able to trigger an extra action, which sounded way more interesting than it kind of ended up being. But you're moving this little sun token around your city board, and the sun will produce resources on tiles that it lands next to, or score points for any temples. You've got a build action, which is how you put temples onto your board, or you have the sideboard, and you're able to build or sort of activate, I guess, buildings that are on that board. There's a cost in resources, and when you activate that building, you then either get an ongoing effect or a one-time sort of bump in resources, abilities, whatever. And then lastly, there is the ability to just simply put more of these hexagonal tiles out onto your city board, which is what the sun is going around. And so as you're building, that your town kind of gets bigger, it takes longer for that sun to get around. You can speed the sun up through some of those extra buildings that you can build. And it's one of those games where there's a bunch of different ways to get points, but there's a couple of right ways to get points. And I didn't figure those out in the first round like the other 2 guys did. And so while they finished this game with 109 and 108 points, I had like 70. I realized too late what I should have been doing. And I think that was always a problem with some of these just really abstract Euro games from a decade or so ago, is that there was just a very, very clear, like, this is kind of what you're supposed to be doing. And yeah, if you want to play this boring, drab-looking title a couple of times, you'll figure that out, right? You'll know what you're supposed to do. Otherwise, you're just going to sit there and spin while everyone else, takes off. I got what it was trying to do. It was fine. No need to ever play it again. That was Helios by Z-Man Games. We wrapped up the night with another round of Rock Hard 1977. I brought this one with me. Mike had played it before with me. I'd forgotten about that game, but this was, I think, play number 6 for me, and I was doing really, really well. I had everything kind of going my way. I had used candy a couple times. I had one sort of crash from all that, and I was really, really just, things were lining up for me just the right way. I had a full band of roadies. I was the first to get the record deal. I had all of my personal objectives met. And then Mike at the last moment just triggered a ton of the set collection with the cards that you get in the nightlife aspect, and just took off with the end game score. And that's the one aspect of that game that I really don't care for. And I realize it's kind of a campy saying that, having lost to it, but I never really understood this idea of, okay, well, if you've gone to all 4 venues in the late night of the game, you get extra points. There's a set collection aspect to it. And it's kind of like, why? Like, it doesn't make any sense to the overall theme of the game. You go, well, I'm just going to go to the bar, not because I care about anything that's there at the bar, but because that's the last color I need to trigger an extra 5 points. Another game that reminds me of that is not Obsession. Vindication, sorry, instead of looking it up here on the wall. Vindication has that same thing where you're trying to have the majority of colors of these various attributes as you're going into the end game. So the person who had the most strength will get a bunch of extra points. The person who had the most visions will get an extra point. And I just never really saw the point of that, because it just felt like at the end, everything else that you're trying to do didn't really matter if you didn't have the most of something. And it just didn't really make a lot of sense to me. But still really enjoying the game. The both of them are kind of like, yeah, I don't think I'd want to play this too many times. I'm like, look, that was game 6. I said I had a lot of fun with it. Rock Hard 1977. And the last game on the list is the one that we played the most recently, and this is the one that I mentioned. Could not wait to get this one off the shelf. We played Boop the Halls. This is from Smirk and Dagger Games. This is the third in kind of a trilogy. There was Boop, there was Boop, which was a Halloween theme, and then Boop the Halls here with a Christmas theme. And I was really kind of curious. I knew that this did a 3D tree display, and obviously you're going to be trying to sort of work with the same criteria. So real quick, every player starts off with 8 kittens ready to go, and then you have 8 cats kind of waiting in a side supply. You're placing out a kitten on the board, and if you place it next to another kitten, whether it's yours or your opponent's, it's only a 2-player game, you will boop that kitten 1 space away from where you placed yours. Other than that, your cats don't move. They just sit there. If you manage to get 3 of your kittens in a row, either by booping them into position or by sort of getting 2 locked side by side, you put a third on the end and they'll kind of counteract each other, right? And that'll create a 3 in a row. And then all those kittens come off the board and they graduate into cats. Cats will also boop kittens, but kittens don't boop cats. And if you manage to do the same thing, getting 3 of your cats in a row, you'll win the game. Now, there's another way to win the game in the original Boop, and I've never played the Halloween theme game. But if you manage to get all 8 of your cats on the board, you also can win the game. There's another way that you can win the game in Boop the Halls, and that is that each player gets 3 little round Christmas ornament pieces. At the beginning of your turn, if you do not have an ornament on the tree, you must place an ornament specifically in one of 8 spots on the board. If your ornament gets booped off the tree by a kitten or gets pounced on by getting booped onto by a cat, then that ornament comes off the tree. Now, if you bumped it off the tree or jumped on it, then you just put it back in your supply, and the next turn you put it back out on the board. But if your opponent manages to knock it off the tree or pounce it, then they keep it and they score it. And the first person to either get 3 cats in a row, all 8 cats out on the tree, or 3 of their opponent's ornaments sort of captured, they win the game. And let me tell you, that really amped up the challenge of this game. It was drastically more difficult to play than the original Boop game. The one thing that was different here, obviously the 3D nature of the tree makes seeing those 3 in a row a little harder to do. My wife was really thrown off by that. There's also the fact that it is not a neat square. The sort of corners of this tree are sort of rounded, if you will. So there's, 12 spaces that are effectively kind of missing from this 7x7 board. And again, that means that while you think, well, I've got a whole other tier that ornament or that cat can get booped away. No, if it gets booped in that corner, it's already at the edge of the board. It's already off the board. And so, as I've said with some other games, this is one of those 2-player games where you very, very quickly find yourself shifting from the offensive to the defensive. And I won the first game against my wife, and then my daughter clobbered me. She captured 2 of my ornaments very, very quickly. I did then manage to get a bunch of kittens graduated into cats, and I kind of started to make a comeback. But then at one point she kind of got that, I don't know if there's a word for it, but she basically had the checkmate move. She had a 3 in a row that she could set up and an ornament of mine that she could kick off, and I could not block both things, right? It was just impossible for me to do anything about it. And in fact, I didn't even realize that the 2 that she had in a row were cats I thought they were, well, no, I knew they were cats. I guess I didn't realize that she had another cat. And I thought that maybe she would just put a kitten there and graduate it to a cat, and I would still have a little bit more time. Then she goes, oh, well, I just won. And I was really happy for her doing so. That was obviously made her really happy when she could beat Dad. Anyways, a really, really neat game. It says surprisingly challenging on the side, and that is 100% true. That new ornament thing just drastically, like I said, drastically increases the tactical play and the challenge of this game. Boop the Halls by Smirk and Dagger. Okay, that ends the Ratchet here, but really quick, I want to trigger off a question of the week. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to go to PAX Unplugged next weekend. I'm going to probably put together a Ratchet episode for next week, but it might just be focused on the PAX experience. I may not do a question of the week next week. So I'm going to go ahead and ask this now, but I'm going to give you 2 weeks to plan for this with every promise I can possibly make to put another episode in between. I want to ask you your favorite 2024 gaming experience. Tell me a quick story about, a favorite game that you played. Does not have to be a game from this year. Just maybe a great experience, maybe a convention you went to, something you maybe did for the first time, maybe somebody you met, whatever. Just think about something that really had an impact, a positive impact on you in the gaming hobby in this past year, and tell me about it in the comments. And I believe for that episode I'm planning this for 2 weeks from now, I'm going to try and do something a little special. So stay tuned for that. I'm looking forward to it. Until then, folks, as always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for just sort of always being there. I appreciate all of you, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.